Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the first video of this series. And honestly speaking, I'm pretty excited to finally be doing this. Now, my goal here with this isn't to, sell you some dream or show you another strategy that's going to change your life, right? What I actually want to do is have a real conversation with you about trading, the kind of conversation I wish someone had with me when I was starting out, not the polished, Instagram worthy version, the messy, frustrating, beautiful, challenging reality of what this journey actually looks like. And I've been sitting on making this video for a bit of time, right? If I'm being honest with you guys, because part of me felt like, is this what people really want to hear? Because let's be real, most people really click on trading videos expecting charts, setups, the technical stuff that makes you feel like you're learning something instantly. And trust me when I say this, we're going to cover all of that in this series too. But today I want to, talk about something different. I want to share my honest perspective, the stuff I've learned from being in the trenches, making mistakes, losing money, winning it back, and everything in between. Now, this isn't stuff I learned from a course or a YouTube video. This is, what the market taught me, what experiences taught me, the things I wish someone had just, sat me down and explained before I jumped in head first, okay? Because here's the thing, trading isn't just about making money, right? Or, being able to read the charts. It's so much deeper than that. It's about who you become along the way, along your journey, right? The discipline you build, the way you handle pressure, or how you deal with failure. That's the stuff that actually matters. And I know this might sound cheesy or whatever, right? But it is true. If you want to be a great trader, you have to become a better person first. And there's no way around it. And honestly speaking with you guys, I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately, thinking about where I've been, where I'm going, and what actually matters to me. And I realized that I wanted to create something real this year, something raw, something honest, something that might actually help someone who's going through what I went through, right? So so that's what the series is going to be, right? Now I'm committed to putting up a video consistently because I genuinely care about this stuff, right? This isn't just content for me. It's something that I'm actually passionate about, and I know it will definitely resonate with you. So what I want you to do is grab a cup of coffee or a drink and, sit back because we're going to have a conversation, okay? And I'm going to go through some of the points, the experiences that I had within my journey, and hopefully it will help you becoming a better trader, a better person, okay? Now, here's the first thing I need to say, and I'm just going to be straight with you guys. And this is, I think, it hit me quite hard as well because I wasn't expecting it, but trading is lonely as hell, like genuinely isolating in a way I wasn't prepared for, right? Now, when you first get into this, you're probably thinking about all the good stuff, right? You're thinking about the freedom, the flexibility, working from anywhere, making your own schedule, waking up whenever you want. And all of that sounds incredible. And honestly, it is, because now when I'm living through all those things, it's just incredible. And I feel so blessed to be able to actually have that kind of life. But what nobody tells you is that all of that freedom comes with a price. And that price is a lot of time spent alone. Now, you're going to be up at weird hours while everyone else is sleeping, resting, chilling. You're going to be glued to the screen while your friends are maybe out for dinner, living their normal lives, and you're going to start missing things, events, parties, weekend trips. Not because you don't want to go, but because you're building something, right? Because you're locked in on this vision that most people, around you just don't see or understand. Okay, and that's the hard part, honestly, because people won't get it. Your friends will think you're being a bit weird, right? Your family might think you're obsessed or wasting time, they'll hit you with the "you're always working," or "why don't you just relax for once?" And part of you will start to wonder if maybe they're right? Maybe you are taking this too seriously. But they don't see what you see, okay? They don't understand what you're working towards is something bigger. A life where you don't have to answer to anyone, right? Where you can wake up whenever you want, do whatever you want, whenever you want, without asking for permission. And I remember, when I first started taking this seriously, like really seriously, I was still working my 9 to 5 as an architect. So I'd be at work all day, come home completely exhausted, and then jump straight into trading. Not like casually either. I'm talking about, hours and hours just sitting at my desk, studying charts, backtesting, journaling every single trade. And I honestly loved it. Like, genuinely, I was obsessed with it. But there were definitely nights, where I would look up from my screen and realize I hadn't spoken to another human maybe in like 2 days. And the only time I had left my apartment was to go to work and come back, right? It was just me and the charts, me and this lonely grind that nobody around me understood. And honestly speaking, some days that loneliness hit me pretty hard, right? I'd see my friends posting pictures from trips or night outs, and I feel this weird mix of FOMO, like, am I missing out on life? But then something clicked for me, I realized that this loneliness, this isolation, this feeling of being, different, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Because if you look at it, it's literally the price of admission for the freedom everyone dreams about, but isn't willing to pay for, isn't willing to go that extra mile. Because, look, freedom isn't free, right? It costs you time that you could be spending, doing normal things. It costs you some relationships that can't survive because, maybe you're being too focused. It costs you fitting in. It costs you being like everyone else. And yeah, I didn't miss out on a lot. Birthdays that I didn't make to, trips with friends I had to turn down, nights out I skipped because I needed to review my trades or prepare for the next session. And some friendships faded because I just wasn't available anymore. And there were definitely moments where I, questioned all of it, whether it's worth it or not, where I wondered if maybe, I should just give up this whole thing and go back to being normal. But now, when I look back at all those sacrifices, those lonely nights, those missed events, those times when I, felt completely isolated from everyone around me, I do feel very grateful now, right? Because those sacrifices, they gave me something that most people will never have, which is real freedom. The ability to live my life on my own terms, to not have to ask permission from anyone, to wake up and choose how I want to spend my day. And that alone is priceless. Okay, so if you're just starting this journey, or if you're in the thick of it right now, feeling lonely and misunderstood, I want you to know something. That loneliness you're feeling, it's your edge, right? While everyone else is distracted, you're focused. While they're out there spending money on experiences they'll probably forget in a week or so, you're building a skill that could literally change your life and your family's life, right? That gap between you and them is growing every single day, right? And you need to come in terms with that, because one day that gap is going to be so wide that you'll be living a completely different reality than they are, right? So yeah, trading is lonely. There's no way around that, but it is also where you find yourself, okay? Where you figure out what you're really made of, where, you build something that's truly yours, something nobody can ever take away from you. And another thing that nobody else warns you about is the emotional swings, right? Like, now, I genuinely don't think anyone in life prepares you for the intensity of emotions you're going to feel while you're going through this, while you're doing this, right? Now, it's like, if I have to explain it, if I have to give an example, it's literally like being on the world's most intense roller coaster, right? Except the ride never really stops and you can't get off either. Because one day you're on top of the world, right? You hit the perfect trade, everything you studied, everything you practice, everything you prepared for, it all just comes together beautifully. You execute flawlessly, the trade goes exactly where you thought it would, and you make more money in one session than you used to make in a week at work, maybe even more, and in that moment, you feel unstoppable. This is it. I'm never losing again. And I've been there so many times. So this is coming from experience as well, that you start feeling invincible. You're already planning what you're going to do with that money, and you're riding that high that feels like it will never end. And coming back to reality, what happens is then the next session, the next day comes, or sometimes even later that same day, and you end up losing, maybe more than you made, and suddenly everything crashes down. You're sitting there staring at the screen thinking like, what the hell just happened? And you start spiraling. You start questioning everything. Your strategy, is it even good? Your rules, did you follow them? Should you have followed them, in a different way? Your intelligence, are you even smart enough to do this? Your entire existence is in question, right? What am I even doing with my life? That's a thought that's going to come to your head, right? And I've had days where I lost so much that I literally had to close my laptop and just sit there in complete silence, right? Trying to process what just happened, trying to understand how I went from feeling like I can never take a loss to feeling like, maybe I don't even know what trading is. And you know what the worst part is? That nobody around you understands. You can't really talk to anyone about it. Your friends don't get it, your family doesn't get it. They just see numbers going up and down and think it's luck or gambling or whatever, right? They don't understand the mental, warfare that's happening in your head every single day. But here's what I learned, right? And this took me a long time to really understand, right? That those emotional swings aren't just random torture. Okay, they're not just happening out of nowhere. They're there to expose every single weakness that I have within me. Every bad habit, every insecurity, every place where I'm not disciplined or controlled is going to show up, because the market doesn't really care about your feelings. It really doesn't. It doesn't care if you've had a bad day at work. It doesn't care if you're stressed about something. It doesn't care if you're tired or you're distracted or emotional. It's just going to do what it does. And if you can't handle that, right? If you can't learn to stay calm while everything around you is in chaos, it's going to be a very, very tough journey for you, right? As simple as that. But here's the beautiful part, and this is why I'm still here after everything, that once you finally learn how to manage those emotions, once you learn, how to detach yourself from the outcome of every single trade and just focus on the process, everything changes, because you become a different person, not just as a trader, right? I'm not just talking about when you open a chart, you're a completely different person. I'm talking about as a human being, right? You learn how to actually control your emotions instead of, letting them control you. You learn how to stay disciplined even when every part of you wants to break your rules. You learn how to trust yourself even when everything feels uncertain and scary, right? And those skills, they don't just help you in trading, they translate to literally everything else in your life. Your relationships, your career decisions, how you handle stress, how you deal with failure, all of it, right? And I, as a person, before I really dabbled into trading, I was really impatient, right? That is something that I really had to work on, and trading forced me to work on that. Because if I didn't, I'd be, still struggling, still unprofitable, and still be thinking, where the hell am I going wrong? And once you identify all these gaps, these holes, these weaknesses, and you work on it, because trading forces you to do it, it's just a game changer from that, right? Everything starts to align then, which naturally, it leads me to talk about the grind, because trading is a grind, like a long, slow, exhausting grind that most people just aren't prepared for, right? Everyone sees the highlight reel, the wins, the success stories, the screenshots of funded accounts, payouts, that, oh, I made 10K today post. And it all looks so easy, right? It looks like people just figured it out overnight. And now they're printing money. But that's just, BS. That's not reality at all, right? The reality is that behind every one of those wins, right, there are literally thousands of hours of work that nobody sees. Nobody sees you waking up at 5 a.m., barely functional, forcing yourself to review charts before the session opens. Nobody sees you staying up until midnight or later, back testing a new idea because you're trying to figure out what went wrong today, right? Or, nobody sees when you're blowing accounts after accounts, and each time thinking, maybe this time it will be different. Nobody sees that failure, right? The mistakes that make you feel stupid, the lessons you had to learn the hard way because you were too stubborn or too confident to learn them the easy way. And I spent time, just trying to get consistent, not even trying to make a lot of money, just trying to stop losing, trying to make money, trying to have more winning days than losing days, trying to follow my own time rules, right? And I blew so many accounts. I passed funded accounts that I was excited about, felt like I finally made it, and then lost them in 2 weeks later or something because I got cocky or emotional or broke my rules in some stupid way. And honestly speaking, I made every single mistake that you can possibly think of, right? Every single one of them. And there were moments early on in my trading journey, where I wanted to quit. It's times where, I sat there thinking, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have it what it takes. But something in me just wouldn't let me quit. I don't know what it was, right? Maybe it was the stubbornness, because I am a bit stubborn as a person, and when I set a goal for myself, I just go for it. Or maybe I was delusional, but whatever it was, it just kept me going, right? I kept showing up, kept putting in the work, even when it felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And then eventually, very slowly, very gradually, things started to click. I started to see things that, I couldn't identify properly. I started understanding how price actually moves instead of just guessing. I started developing my own way of reading the market that felt more natural to me, right? So it took a bit of time, it took a lot of patience, so much of showing up every single day, even when I didn't want to, even when it felt like pointless, even when it felt like I was just banging my head against the wall. And that is what you need to understand if you're going to do this. There is no shortcut. There's no magic indicator someone's going to sell you that makes this easy, There's no secret strategy that works every time. It's just you, the charts, and your willingness to put in the work every single day, right? There's no off days. It has to be every single day. Trading is uncertain by its very nature. You never know if your next trade is going to work out. You never know if this week is going to be amazing, or if you're going to just hit a drawdown. You just don't know for sure, right? And for a lot of people, maybe even most people, that level is completely unbearable, because we are conditioned from childhood to want guarantees. You want stability, to know if we put in X amount of work, we'll get Y amount of result. And that's how school worked. That's how most jobs work. You do your thing, you get the outcome. But trading doesn't work that way at all, because you can do everything right, follow your plan perfectly, manage your risk properly, execute with discipline, and still end up losing the trade, right? You can have the best setup you've ever seen your entire week, take the trade exactly how you're supposed to, and still get stopped out. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's just how it is. And if you can make peace with that, if you can't accept that you're never going to have complete control over what happens, over the outcome, is going to eat your life. Because I used to be like that, right? I used to not like the fact that there's no guarantees. I wanted to know that every trade I took was going to work out, right? I wanted to feel certain about everything. But over time, I realized that I was looking at it all wrong. The point isn't to be right all the time. The point isn't to win every trade either. The point is to manage your risk properly. Stay consistent with the process and trust that over a large enough sample size, over hundreds of trades, the probabilities will work in your favor, right? And that's it. That's the whole game. And once I finally accepted that, once I stopped trying to control outcomes I couldn't control and just focus on controlling what I could, which is the process, which, is my strategy, my risk management, my trade management. Everything got so much easier. The emotional swings got less intense. The losses didn't hurt that much. The wins didn't make me overconfident. And I just focused on executing my process, trade after trade after trade. And, trusting that the math would work out over time. Now, everything, I have just told you, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, this sounds absolutely terrible, right? Why would anyone want to do this? Why would, I put myself through all of this? And look, I get it. I just spent the last however many minutes telling you about loneliness, emotional torture, endless grinding, no guarantees, and not exactly the most inspiring, sales pitch, right? But here's the thing, and this is what I need you to really hear. The reward is real because all of this stuff that I just talked about, the loneliness, the sacrifices, the emotional swings, the grind, all of it, it is all worth it, okay? Because when you finally break through, when you finally become consistent, or you finally prove to yourself that you can actually do this thing that most people fail at, it's honestly one of the best feelings in the world, right? You realize you're different. You realize that, you built something that is real, something that nobody can ever take it from you, a skill that can generate income from literally anywhere in the world at any time. So you're not dependent on a boss or a company or an economy or anything external. It's just you and your ability, right? And that freedom, that's independence, right? There's no price tag you can put on that. It is priceless. So you get to wake up and actually do what you want with your day. You get to spend real time with the people you love, not just stressed out evenings after a long day at work. You get to travel if you want, create things, explore, build a life you always imagined but never thought was actually possible. And that is what this is all about. That's what makes all the lonely nights and blown accounts and emotional breakdowns worth it. So look, I'm not here to scare you. I'm not trying to make trading sound impossible or only for special people, whatever. I'm just giving you, the raw truth, the real honest truth about what this journey actually looks like. Because you deserve to know what you're signing up for. Yes, trading is hard. It's probably one of the hardest things you'll ever attempt in your life. But if you're willing to embrace all of it, the good parts, the really difficult parts, if you're willing to put in the work and stay committed even when it's, tough, you can absolutely make it. You can build the life you want. But you've got to be honest with yourself first, right? You've got to look at everything I just talked about and decide if you're really ready for it. Okay, so welcome to the series. This is just the beginning, right? We're going to go deep. We're going to be covering technical stuff, the psychology related, mindset, strategy, basically everything you need. And I promise you, by the end of this, if you stick with me, you're going to be a different person, right? A completely different trader. So let's do this, and I'll see you in the next one.